Okay, so here's a question I genuinely could not stop thinking about once it entered my head. What did early humans actually do all day? Like before jobs, before school, before alarm clocks and commutes and emails and grocery stores and everything else that fills up a modern human day. Before any of that existed, what were people actually doing with their time? Because here's the thing, Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans, have existed for roughly 300,000 years. Agriculture, the thing that changed everything, only appeared about 12,000 years ago, which means that for the vast, overwhelming majority of human existence, about 96% of our entire time on this planet, people were living as hunter-gatherers. No farms, no cities, no governments, no written language, no money, just humans on a landscape every single day. So what did that actually look like? What did they eat for breakfast? How long did they sleep? Did they have friends? Did they get bored? Did they fall in love? Did they sit around fires and tell stories? Did they laugh? The answer to all of those questions, and I think this is genuinely one of the most fascinating things I have ever looked into, is so much richer and so much more surprising than most people expect. Let's go find out. Let's start at the beginning of a day, because even something as simple as waking up was fundamentally different for early humans than it is for us. The first thing to understand is that early humans almost certainly did not sleep the way we do. We tend to imagine prehistoric people sleeping in a long, unbroken block, 8 hours, lights out, done. But anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the San people of the Kalahari, the Hadza of Tanzania, or the Tsimane of Bolivia, have found something consistently surprising. They don't sleep that way at all. A landmark study published in the journal Current Biology looked at the sleep patterns of 3 different hunter-gatherer groups across Africa and South America. What they found was that these groups averaged around 6 to 7 hours of sleep per night, less than most sleep scientists recommend for modern humans. But they also found that the sleep was often segmented. People would sleep for a few hours, wake up, be active or social for a period, and then sleep again. This pattern, sometimes called biphasic sleep, appears across historical records too. References to a first sleep and a second sleep appear in medieval European literature, suggesting that sleeping in 2 separate blocks was considered completely normal until artificial lighting changed our relationship with darkness. So our early human wakes up, possibly for the second time, as light begins to appear, and the first thing on their mind is almost certainly the same thing on yours: food. The morning begins with the immediate practical question of what there is to eat. And this is where things get interesting, because the answer varied enormously depending on where in the world these people were living. A group living on the coast of South Africa 100,000 years ago had access to shellfish, fish, seaweed, and marine mammals. We know this because the caves at Pinnacle Point in South Africa contain some of the earliest evidence of systematic shellfish eating. Middens, essentially ancient rubbish heaps, filled with shellfish shells going back at least 165,000 years. A group living on the East African savanna had access to tubers, underground plant storage organs that are extraordinarily calorie dense, along with berries, nuts, fruits, honey, and the meat of whatever animals they could hunt or scavenge. A group living in Ice Age Europe 30,000 years ago was hunting woolly mammoths, reindeer, and horses across frozen landscapes. The diet of early humans was not one thing, it was everything. And that dietary flexibility, that ability to eat almost anything the environment provided, is one of the core reasons Homo sapiens spread across the entire planet when every other hominin species eventually went extinct. But here is the thing that probably surprises people most about early human mornings. They were not spent in frantic, desperate food searching. The image of prehistoric humans as constantly on the brink of starvation, spending every waking hour desperately hunting and gathering, turns out to be almost entirely wrong. In the 1960s, anthropologist Marshall Salins proposed something that genuinely shocked the academic world at the time. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. His argument was this: hunter-gatherers are affluent not because they have enormous amounts of stuff, but because their needs are few, and those needs are easily met. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups consistently find that meeting basic caloric and nutritional needs takes somewhere between 2 and 5 hours of work per day. 2 to 5 hours per day. Studies of the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the last remaining true hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, have found that Hadza men spend roughly 2 to 3 hours per day in active food acquisition. Women, who are primarily responsible for gathering rather than hunting, spend around 3 to 4 hours. The rest of the day is, by modern standards, remarkably free. Now, and this is important, that doesn't mean early humans were sitting around doing nothing. It means their definition of work and leisure was entirely different from ours. Almost everything they did had some practical purpose. But a lot of what they did also looks, from the outside, a lot like what we would call leisure. So what filled those hours? If there is one thing that stands out above everything else when you look at how early humans spent their time, it is this: they were intensely, almost obsessively social. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups consistently find that a significant portion of each day is spent in social interaction, talking, sitting together, grooming, which in humans takes the form of conversation rather than physical picking, telling stories, playing with children, resolving conflicts, maintaining the complex web of relationships that held the group together. And that group, the band, was the fundamental unit of human existence for hundreds of thousands of years. Hunter-gatherer bands are typically small, somewhere between 20 and 50 people in the immediate group, what anthropologists call the band. But bands were connected to larger networks, tribes of several hundred people who shared language, culture, and territory. And beyond that, extended networks of thousands connected through trade, intermarriage, and occasional large gatherings. Within the band, everybody knew everybody, intimately. Your entire social world was 20 to 50 people, and you interacted with most of them every single day of your life. The psychological implications of this are enormous. Human brains evolved in this context. The capacity for empathy, the sensitivity to social approval and rejection, the need for belonging, and status within a group, all of it evolved in a world where your band was everything, where being exiled from the group meant almost certain death. Robin Dunbar, the British anthropologist who proposed what is now called Dunbar's number, suggested that the human brain can maintain stable social relationships with approximately 150 people at once. He arrived at this number by looking at the size of social groups across primate species and correlating them with brain size. And 150 is strikingly close to the size of the extended tribal network that hunter-gatherers appear to have maintained. So early humans spent a lot of time maintaining those 150 relationships. And the primary tool for doing so was language. Here is something that will either delight or horrify you, depending on your personality. The most important social technology in early human life was almost certainly gossip. Robin Dunbar, the same researcher who gave us Dunbar's number, has also argued extensively that human language evolved primarily for social bonding. And the primary content of that social bonding was information about other people. Who did what? Who can be trusted? Who broke a social rule? Who is sleeping with whom? Who is generous and who is selfish? In a small band where trust and cooperation are literally matters of survival, this information is not trivial. Knowing who in your group is reliable in a crisis could determine whether you live or die. Knowing who is likely to cheat in a food-sharing arrangement allows you to protect yourself. Understanding the social landscape of your group is a survival skill. Studies of conversation content in modern humans consistently find that a significant portion, estimates range from 60% to 80%, is social in nature. Talking about other people, relationships, and social situations. This isn't a modern failure. It appears to be what human language evolved to do. And beyond gossip, early humans talked constantly about everything, about the hunt, about the weather, about the plants that were ready to pick, about the strange sound they heard at the edge of camp last night, about the group they encountered at the waterhole last season, about the old woman who knew which roots cured stomach pain. Language was the technology that made human cooperation possible at scales no other animal had achieved, and every day was filled with it. But let's talk about the part everyone actually wants to know about, the hunt. Because hunting was real, it was important, it was dangerous, and it was, based on the evidence we have, something that occupied a meaningful portion of early human life, particularly for men. Archaeological evidence of systematic hunting goes back at least 500,000 years, long before anatomically modern humans appeared. Wooden spears found at a site in Germany called Schöningen, dated to around 300,000 years ago, are aerodynamically designed projectile weapons that could only have been used for active hunting, not scavenging. But what did a hunt actually look like? It depended enormously on the environment, the available prey, and the technology. Early human hunting strategies ranged from ambush hunting, waiting near water sources where animals came to drink, to persistence hunting, one of the most extraordinary athletic feats in the natural world. Persistence hunting is exactly what it sounds like. A group of hunters, sometimes just one or two, chase an animal, not at full speed, not trying to outrun it, but at a steady jogging pace, tracking it, following it, never letting it rest. Most animals, when they run, overheat quickly. They are sprinters. Humans, with our upright posture, our sweat glands, our ability to breathe independently of our stride, are endurance machines. The Hadza, the San, and several other hunter-gatherer groups have been documented practicing persistence hunting. The kudu, a large African antelope, can be run to exhaustion and heat stroke in a matter of hours by a hunter who simply refuses to stop following it. The animal collapses. The hunter walks up and delivers the killing blow. Think about that for a moment. Early humans could run animals to death without a single weapon beyond their own endurance. But hunting was also, and this is critical, not a daily activity. Large game hunts were episodic, sometimes successful, often not. The San people of the Kalahari succeed on roughly 1 in 4 hunting attempts. A large kill might provide enough meat to feed the entire band for several days. In the meantime, gathering provided the reliable caloric foundation that hunting supplemented. And when a hunt was successful, the social event that followed was enormous. Meat was shared, almost always. The sharing of large game is one of the most consistent features of hunter-gatherer societies across the world. No single hunter or family kept the entire animal. It was distributed through the group according to complex rules of kinship, obligation, and reciprocity. The successful hunter gained enormous social status, not from keeping the meat, but from giving it away. Now here is a fact that consistently surprises people. In most hunter-gatherer societies, gathering provides more calories than hunting, sometimes significantly more. Studies of the Kung San of the Kalahari in the 1960s, one of the most extensively studied hunter-gatherer groups in history, found that gathered plant foods provided approximately 60 to 80% of total caloric intake. Hunting was important, but gathering was the foundation, and gathering was primarily the domain of women, though this varied across cultures and environments. Gathering was skilled work, deeply skilled. It required an encyclopedic knowledge of the local environment that took years to develop. Which plants were edible at which stage of growth? Which roots were ready to dig in which season? Which berries were safe and which were toxic? Where to find water in a dry season? How to read the landscape for signs of underground tubers? A skilled gatherer carried in her head a mental map of the local environment of extraordinary detail and complexity. Archaeological evidence suggests that early humans were exploiting dozens of different plant species simultaneously, rotating through resources as seasons changed, moving across landscapes with a sophisticated understanding of what each area offered at each time of year. Children learned by watching, by accompanying adults from an early age, by being shown, corrected, and taught over years of daily practice. The transfer of this ecological knowledge from one generation to the next was one of the most important activities in early human life, and it happened not in classrooms or through books, but through daily experience, conversation, and demonstration. Speaking of children, what did early human children actually do? The answer, based on evidence from archaeology and from modern hunter-gatherer studies, is both simple and profound. They played, constantly, and they were given extraordinary freedom to do so. hunter-gatherer children are consistently described by anthropologists as among the most free-ranging, self-directed, and autonomous children on Earth. They are not scheduled. They are not supervised in the helicopter parenting sense. From relatively young ages, 5, 6, 7 years old, children in hunter-gatherer societies move freely through the camp and surrounding area, forming their own playgroups, organizing their own games, and largely managing their own time. Play in hunter-gatherer children is not random. It is almost always practice. Children play at hunting, throwing sticks and stones at targets. They play at building, constructing small shelters. They play at gathering, handling, and identifying plants. They play at the social dynamics of adult life, negotiating, resolving conflicts, establishing status hierarchies within their peer groups. Peter Gray, a research professor at Boston College, who has written extensively on the evolution of play, argues that hunter-gatherer children are essentially self-educating through play, that the freedom to play, to explore, experiment, fail, and try again without adult direction, is how young humans evolved to learn the complex skills required for adult life. Children also sat with adults, listened to conversations, heard stories, watched skilled work being performed. The boundary between childhood and adult life in hunter-gatherer societies was permeable in a way that modern schooling has almost completely eliminated. Now here is the part that I think changes how you see early humans entirely. They made art, they made music, they told stories, and they did so with a sophistication and intentionality that is genuinely breathtaking. The cave paintings of Lascaux in France, created approximately 17,000 years ago, depict horses, aurochs, deer, and other animals with a naturalistic skill that stunned the art world when they were discovered in 1940. Pablo Picasso, after visiting Lascaux, reportedly said, "We have invented nothing." But Lascaux is not the oldest art we have found, not even close. Cave paintings in Sulawesi, Indonesia, dated to at least 45,500 years ago, depict a pig and a row of human figures in what appears to be a hunting scene. A carved figurine called the Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, found in Germany and dated to approximately 40,000 years ago, depicts a human body with a lion's head. It required extraordinary craftsmanship and planning to create. Red ochre, a pigment that appears to have been used for body decoration and symbolic purposes, has been found at archaeological sites dating back at least 300,000 years. Music appears to be equally ancient. Bone flutes found in Germany, made from vulture bone and mammoth ivory, date to approximately 40,000 years ago. But the capacity for music is almost certainly far older than the oldest surviving instruments. Voice, percussion, rhythm. These require no tools, only a body and a social context in which to use it. And storytelling. The evidence for storytelling is harder to find archaeologically. Stories leave no direct physical trace, but every living hunter-gatherer society places storytelling at the absolute center of cultural life. Stories told around fires at night. Stories that encode practical knowledge. Where to find water, which animals are dangerous, which plants heal and which kill. Stories that explain the origin of things. Stories that bind the group together through shared narrative and identity. Some researchers have argued that the stories told around early human fires, about hunts, about encounters with other groups, about the behavior of animals and the patterns of weather, were the original form of what we now call science, systematic attempts to make sense of the world through narrative and accumulated observation. But early human life was not all storytelling and leisure. There was darkness too. Violence between groups existed. Archaeological evidence of interpersonal violence, skulls with blunt force trauma, bones with embedded projectile points, appears throughout the prehistoric record. The question of how violent early humans actually were is one of the most debated in anthropology. The evidence suggests a complicated picture. Within bands, violence appears to have been relatively rare and strongly socially sanctioned. Between bands, conflict occurred, sometimes lethally. But early humans also cared for each other in ways that are deeply moving. Archaeological evidence of healed injuries is widespread. Bones that were broken and then healed, which requires weeks or months of care and feeding, while the injured person cannot contribute to the group's subsistence. A Neanderthal skeleton found at Shenadar Cave in Iraq, dating to approximately 45,000 years ago, shows evidence of severe injuries sustained early in life. A withered arm, possible blindness, healed leg injuries. This individual survived to old age, which would have been impossible without sustained care from the group over many years. Early humans knew a great deal about medicinal plants. Evidence of plant use for healing, including yarrow and other medicinal herbs found at burial sites, suggests that knowledge of plant medicine was part of the cultural toolkit of early human groups. The person who held that knowledge, what we might call a healer or shaman, held significant social status. Death itself was treated with ceremony. The deliberate burial of the dead, sometimes with grave goods, ochre, flowers, and objects of personal significance, appears in the archaeological record going back at least 100,000 years. This suggests not only emotional attachment to the dead, but some form of belief about what death meant, some concept of an afterlife or a world beyond the visible one. Early humans grieved. They buried their dead with care. They remembered them. And finally, perhaps the most intimate question of all, what did early humans think about? We cannot know this directly. There are no written records, no diaries, no philosophy texts, but we can make reasonable inferences. And what those inferences suggest is that early human minds were, in most fundamental ways, identical to ours. The same brain, the same capacity for language, abstract thought, emotion, imagination, and self-reflection. The same awareness of mortality, the same ability to think about the past and future, the same capacity for love, jealousy, ambition, generosity, and cruelty. They thought about the people they loved, about the hunt that went wrong last week and how to do it differently, about the strange lights in the sky and what they might mean, about the old woman in the group who seemed to know things nobody else knew, about whether the group camped by the river to the east were friends or enemies, about the child who was sick and whether the plant the healer used would work. They wondered, they imagined, they dreamed. The cave paintings tell us something extraordinary about the inner life of early humans. Someone sitting in a cave in France 17,000 years ago looked at a wall of rock and saw in it the outline of a horse, and then spent hours carefully painting it, not for food, not for shelter, not for any immediate practical purpose, but because something in them needed to make the image real, needed to create, needed to leave a mark that said, I was here, I saw this, I made this. That is not the inner life of an animal driven purely by survival instinct. That is a mind that is recognizably, completely, and profoundly human. So what did early humans actually do all day? They woke up, probably in two stages. They ate whatever the landscape and season provided. They spent 2 to 5 hours acquiring food through gathering and occasional hunting. They talked endlessly and richly about people, events, and the world around them. They played, especially as children. They made things, tools, art, music, clothing, shelter. They cared for each other through illness and injury. They told stories around fires as the darkness gathered. They buried their dead with tenderness. And in the spaces between all of it, they sat with the people they loved, watched the sun move across the sky, felt the wind change direction, listened to the sounds of the world around them with a depth of attention that most of us, embedded in our screens and schedules, have almost entirely lost. For 300,000 years, this was what it meant to be human. And here is the thought I cannot shake, the thought that started this whole video and that I keep coming back to. We are those people, genetically, neurologically, psychologically. We are almost identical to the humans who painted those horses on cave walls 17,000 years ago. The same needs, the same fears, the same capacity for love and curiosity and wonder. The world changed almost beyond recognition, but the humans inside it, the ones looking out through these eyes, haven't changed very much at all.